You won't believe how one man managed to sell the Eiffel Tower twice. Yes, you heard that right. It is a real-life story of Victor Lustig, the most famous con man who pulled off one of the most audacious scams in history and escaped the long arm of the law not once, but twice. It was the year 1925, and Paris was buzzing with life. Among these, a pride of France was the newly built monstrous construction called the Eiffel Tower, which others deemed a giant cage. In contemplating Parisian's reception, one can recall that some French citizens regarded the structure as an eyesore, a temporary structure that existed long after its usefulness. Walking around the city one day, Lustig came across an article in the newspaper that dealt with the controversy touching upon the tower. The article raised the issue of the high cost of maintenance and suggested that the government may think of decommissioning it. While most people saw this as just another piece of information that did not concern them, this was a blessing for Lustig. What if he could influence someone into thinking that the Eiffel Tower is up for sale for scrapping? And what is even more ambitious, he thought, what if he could sell it on his own? Lustig was not a petty thief. He was a professional at it and was very good at what he did. He knew that to perform a con, the narrative had to be perfect and the lie was impossible to spot. He started with a fake civil servant, which also came with fake documents as evidence of the fabricated story. The next move had to be aimed at selecting the candidates to become victims, wealthy and wishing to become even wealthier men. He chose 5 of the best metal dealers in Paris and invited them to a meeting that was to take place in the Hôtel des Crillons. It was no coincidence that he chose an elegant location, as the fancy surroundings compounded the credibility of Lustig's words. For this meeting, Lustig assumed the identity of a deputy director general in the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He said that the government wished to sell the Eiffel Tower secretly in order to not cause an uproar, and that they had especially picked him for this job. Since there were contentious programs as to what will happen to the tower, it was easy to believe what he was saying. The dealers were interested, but not that much to give it a shot on their own. Lustig was aware that they would not believe him, and he had an answer to all the questions that they could ask. He even planned for a tour that would include the Eiffel Tower, and he showed how the tower had signs of rust and general negligence, which he claimed was evidence of the fact that he was telling the truth. That is why by the end of the day, Lustig successfully transferred their doubts into dollars. Lustig had 5 interested parties, but he understood that if he were to make a success, he had to concentrate on one. His mark, André Poisson, a metal merchant not very experienced in the profession and willing to cut a figure. In his desire to achieve greater success, Lustig was able to observe that Poisson was an ambitious man, a man who had already shown that he did not like the feeling of being outcompeted by more elaborate competitors. Lustig chose to promise Poisson what he wanted by telling him that he would bring the deal where he would receive a little incentive in the form of a bribe. To clinch the deal, Lustig gave suggestions that Poisson was the favorite, the man capable of sealing this kind of deal that comes once in a lifetime. That flattery did make its point to Poisson, who fully believed that he would soon be the owner of the Eiffel Tower. Poisson then gave over the money, an appreciable amount, and expected to go down in the history of France as the man who bought the Eiffel Tower. That is where Lustig, of course, had different plans. The day that the money was handed over, he immediately ran off to Vienna, which left Poisson holding the bag, nothing but a piece of paper. What happened next was one of the greatest achievements of Lustig's planning. Poisson felt that he was a fool who was swindled and too ashamed to go to the police to report the matter. Indeed, who would ever think that a person could be so gullible to purchase the Eiffel Tower? That very fact was beneficial to Lustig because the plots of such scams are generally absurd. He did not have to be prosecuted and given a legal sanction, but rather vanished into obscurity with his wallets made fat by fraud. But that's not the end of it. Lustig was not satisfied with just getting away with one of the world's biggest con jobs. He was back in Paris several months later, eager to do the same trick all over again. This time, there was not the same energy, nerve, and force evident in this man, and also there was more calculation, reflection, and therefore restraint. He targeted a new set of prospective customers and laid grounds for a second sale of the Eiffel Tower. In many regards, the second approach can even be seen as more ambitious than the first one. Lustig realized he was taking a big risk. There were many chances of being caught, yet at the same time, the possibilities of earning a lot of money were never out of sight. Being attentive and oriented to the buyers, he chose a new group of potential customers and started preparing for the second round of the Eiffel Tower sale. The proceedings were akin to the first con, where Lustig posed as a government agent and organized a meeting at a high-profile venue. He emulated each thing he did during the first scam, right from the luxury of the meeting venue down to the fake story about a secret government plot to demolish the tower. Lustig once again succeeded in persuading a group of metal dealers that they were about to get one of the world's most popular landmarks. However, this time, one of the potential buyers grew suspicious. Unlike Poisson, this particular buyer was not as convinced to buy the tower due to Lustig's mysterious appeal and proceeded to do some research. He immediately reported to the police, and they realized that Lustig was trying to do the same trick that he had done before only a few months back. Knowing that it was over for him, Lustig leaves Paris right away. This leaves those who he planned to trick just a story that they cannot even comprehend. In fact, Mr. Lustig's audacity didn't just end with the Eiffel Tower scams. Throughout his life, he was involved in so many more cons, some of which were the money printing box scams that businessmen in Europe and America fall for. The fact that he is one of the world's most infamous fraudsters was not only due to the amount of money he stole and the daring nature thereof, but also by the skill with which this was accomplished. And even when finally caught, arrested, and imprisoned in Alcatraz, Lustig continued being a man of mystery. He was a master at the art of manipulation and ensured that he made his victims believe whatever he wanted them to believe to benefit himself in the process. Even to this day, the tale of how he sold the Eiffel Tower twice over has remained one of the telling stories of the power of the human mind when enlisted in the charge to come up with innovations that cannot be described or evaluated. The outlook of Lustig goes far beyond the typical crime story. He also educates people on the fact of audacity and skillful manipulation. In a world where reality is often even more unbelievable than fiction, Victor Lustig is one of history's most fascinating figures. A man of vision who saw chances where others saw the impossible and had the nerve to seize it. If you loved this, check out the other videos below to view even more interesting comparisons and current topics.